Hi, Aaron. Welcome to BizTalk. That's my great pleasure having me today. How are you?
Doing well. How about yourself?
Oh, good. Thank you for coming. So let's start talking about Ponto.
Yeah, so my name's Aaron Roubitchek, and I'm the founder and CEO of Ponto Footwear. Um, so Ponto was founded under the hypothesis that traditional footwear has for far too long viewed fashion and function as mutually exclusive characteristics. Fact has it that we as consumers own closets full of hyper-specific footwear that serve occasional use cases. So think the dress shoes for the wedding, the Nike trainers for the Saturday errands in the gym. And what this all really boils down to is we lack good looking transitional footwear that aligns with consumer demand for values driven do good brands and products. At Ponto, we're reimagining the consumer apparel space by providing hybridized footwear that transitions between work, play, and everything in between and keeps the planet in mind with every detail. The vision behind Ponto manifests really in our first shoe line, which you can see here that we called the Pacific. And it's a sustainably made multi-occasion style that's elevated like a dress shoe up top and feels like a squishy trainer down below. The upper is made from recycled leather, which is fully water repellent, uses 95% recycled water, and is much less toxic on both the factory worker and the land surrounding factories than the majority of vegan alternatives. The shoe also features a sugarcane infused foam bottom and a eucalyptus tree pulp tensile liner on the inside of the shoe that lengthens the useful life and prevents foot odor with natural tree fibers. So Pontos can be worn both socked and sockless. We differentiate ourselves in the saturated space of footwear by providing footwear that's highly durable, functional, and comfortable, while also building it on a brand and product aesthetic that feels inherently luxury. Excuse me. When you couple this with the level of sustainable rigor that we hold our brand to, no other brand achieves the same trifecta of design, comfort, and sustainability emphasis. Our sustainable impact certainly expands outside product design, materials, and manufacturing. And more specifically, we donate 1% of sales to an ocean conservancy project called Changing Tides Foundation, founded in our hometown of Encinitas, California, and centered around empowering women to protect the planet. We enable circular economy by compensating Ponto customers to send their used pairs back to us, where we then credit them $20 to our store, and their used pairs go on to the nonprofit Souls for Souls, where they're actually repaired and then become the initial consignment inventory for aspiring female entrepreneurs in developing nations like Haiti, opening up their first retail consignment locations, and also helping to fund education programs and marketing, finance, et cetera, to further empower these female entrepreneurs. We also fully ship carbon neutral from a freight and parcel perspective through our partnership with flexport.org. The global footwear market is projected to be worth about $440 billion by 2026, growing at a 2.4% compounded annual growth rate per year globally and a 6.7% CAGR in the US. And this is really largely driven by overall rising demand for more all-inclusive footwear that's elevated, trendy, and comfortable for all age groups. In terms of current market size and our plans to capitalize on that growth, the total addressable market for footwear worldwide is set to be worth $400 billion in 2022. Within that, we service a market worth roughly $190 billion per year that consists of casual footwear buyers. We're on pace to capture $3 million of that opportunity by the end of 2022 and $10 million of that opportunity by the end of 2023. Our target market we refer to as change makers. They're generally ages 25 to 44, live in major metropolitans, work in professions such as finance, tech, medicine, education, restaurant and bar work, as well as airline and hospitality staff. They either have a bachelor's or graduate degree or currently working towards one. Generally, they're mindful of both their overall wellness and health and are civically engaged with a global outlook. Their lives surround around movement, so comfort and versatile footwear that seamlessly blends from occasion to occasion is of the utmost importance to them. Brands that appeal to them span Cole Haan, Patagonia, Figs, and Away suitcases. And on average, these individuals earn roughly $68,000 per year. We currently sell direct to consumer through our site at a retail price of $129. Our freight on board cost is roughly $28, and our gross margin is roughly 55%. We have maintained a return rate of about 13% across the nearly 6,000 orders we have generated, which when you compare it to the industry average return rate for e-commerce footwear of over 30% is remarkably low. While the crux of our revenue to date has been direct to consumer, we will continue to open revenue streams in retail, dropshipping marketplaces, and B2B employee gifting programs going into 2022 as we diversify our omnichannel strategy. Our funding to date prior to the round that we're currently raising for totals about $540,000, which was generated across a Kickstarter, friends and family, personal investment, and an SBA 7A loan. As of December 1st, 2021, we've generated $700,000 in gross sales since launching on Black Friday 2020. And this is after selling $50,000 in a single day from our spot on the major television show Good Morning America back in July. In terms of our plans for future growth, we plan to hit $3 million in sales in 2022 and $10 million in sales in 2023. We're on pace to break even in the summer of 2022, and our Series A will follow soon thereafter in early 2023. Our path to investor exit will either be through IPO or acquisition through achieving north of $200 million in annual revenue by 2030. Alongside working as the founder and CEO of Ponto for the past 3 years, I have worked at Google and YouTube for the past nearly 5 years, where I actually resigned to go full-time on Ponto just 9 weeks ago, and where I co-founded Ponto for nearly the entirety of the latter half of my career at Google. My co-founder and chief operating officer, Joseph Markey, has a background in mechanical engineering, having received both a bachelor's and master's degree from UC Berkeley, and his work experience spans various social impact startups in the Silicon Valley, having set up fully functioning manufacturing lines overseas in Asia prior to coming to Ponto. Our 5 equity owning advisors span a diverse set of skill sets from product design, footwear expertise, digital marketing, logistics, and more. John Knight, who you can see here, currently serves as the Global VP of Design and Creative Direction at Fanatics, and his prior work experience includes being head design director at the North Face, Under Armour, Yeezy, and more. Tara Walpert-Levy has spent the past 12 years working at Google and YouTube, reporting directly to the C-suite, and has experienced firsthand the tailwinds and headwinds of digital marketing and rapidly scaling a disruptive organization. Scott Brown is our resident shoe dog and spent nearly 20 years at Nike, managing their entire Asia-Pacific footwear supply chain operation. Lauren Cutshaw is a brand marketing guru who spent her career across various marketing leadership roles in the health and wellness space. And our longest standing advisor, Greg Moser, specializes in e-commerce tech, logistics, and finance, currently serving as the founder and president of a fast-growing 3PL that Ponto actually leverages for our own warehouse and parcel shipping needs. Our organic marketing partnerships and influencer activations span across people with different points of appeal across our various brand pillars. We reach our audience primarily through Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and email marketing, and these efforts have greatly contributed to much of the organic growth that balances out the growth we've achieved with paid media. We've been featured in Forbes, Good Morning America, Harper's Bazaar, Business Insider, Men's Health, and more, and we have a major slate of earned press activations that are launching as we speak and moving into early 2022. At Ponto, we're reminded of our why through stories of our customers feeling empowered as more wholesome versions of themselves by looking good, feeling good, and doing good in ways that conventional footwear brands simply do not allow. Take the example of Gail Myers, a woman suffering from multiple sclerosis who wrote to us praising how Pontos had reduced her foot pain, ankle swelling, and back pain, while also looking good in the ways that the clunky, obtuse aesthetic of typical orthotics had never provided for her. Other examples include newly naturalized Brazilian dreamers, posting tweets that go viral from their naturalization ceremony, becoming citizens of the US, naturally in a pair of Pontos, where they're reflecting back on their climb out of poverty to now being a CEO on the Inc. 5000 fastest growing company list. And this is after coming to the US with no more than $200 in their pocket. These anecdotes span changemakers far and wide, from teachers back in the classroom for the first time in 2 years and coping with all that difficulty, to the overworked healthcare worker, and many more who are all in the arena and each uniquely embody the spirit of Ponto. We invite and challenge you to take your first steps towards change alongside ours as we empower one another to be more mindful with both self and planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. It's very remarkable what you're doing. Let me ask you, you've been very already more than precise and covering all aspects of your startup. What drives your design?
That's a great question. So one could say, the early founding team of Ponto we're unconventional entrants to the industry of footwear. And we're firmly of the belief from a product thesis perspective that, there's a lot of brands out there doing remarkable things for sustainability from a materials perspective, et cetera. But at the end of the day, we far overthink what it's going to actually take to solve the consumer crisis that, rolls up into the broader crisis of climate change. And what that is we just simply consume way too much stuff. And the reason that is because we live in a world that creates product with hyper-specific occasional use case products. That's why we all own 15 to 20 pairs of footwear on average. I would like to think if we're debating going to space, becoming a multi-planetary species, we can create far more transitional items that serve a lot more, use cases within our lives. And so that's where we start with footwear, is through everything is hybridized product design. And what that really means is we believe that fashion designers often are trying to appeal to trends. They're trying to think of out of the box solutions, but we truly believe that it's the burden of the fashion designer to take sort of the mindset of an industrial designer, where when you're creating a shoe and trying to come up with a new silhouette, you only know it's done when it's deeply packed with so many individual design features and nuances that make it of the highest utility possible. And at the point where you cannot take one of those individual features or nuances away without actually compromising the usefulness of that item, that's when the product's done. And then when you layer on top of that, the most sustainable materials out there that not just adhere to sort of present definitions of vegan, et cetera. Vegan, really what that means largely in the world of leather right now is a rebrand on leather. There's a lot of exciting biotech going on to develop vegan leather alternatives, but they're very far away for the most part from being commercially viable. And so that term vegan is really cloudy. We obviously live in a very black and white world right now. It's for that reason that we chose to use recycled leather. And the reason that is because it's much more friendly on the factory worker itself. The majority of vegan leathers that are extremely petroleum intensive are very toxic for the majority of factory workers, as well as surrounding factory areas. And what recycled leather is in a leather tannery, for example, let's say for LVMH, they have a piece of leather sheet. About 70% of that leather sheet, when trimmed to be used for a purse, actually ends up going into landfill. So we actually take that material, similar to like how plywood is produced, turn it into a new leather alternative, uses 95% recycled water. So it's much more friendly on the actual factory worker itself and surrounding factory area. And it creates a product that's almost that's waterproof, et cetera. So it's things like that. It's more an all-encompassing approach of like, let's look at the whole footprint of this material, not just hot buzz terms that are in market today, as well as sort of this approach to industrial design and packing something in a way that makes it so deeply useful that you only know when you're done, when you can't take something away from it without compromising its usefulness.
I do love the word transitional, in this case, footwear, but let me say transitional fashion. Okay, how difficult it can be to give this message to people who believe that fashion is buy 5,000 pair of shoes, wear one and leave it there for another 2 years and buy another one.
Yeah, so first and foremost, I think we just need to sort of take a step back and think about how has life changed in terms of our relationship to technology, and how does that affect what, the items that we need in our lives. Obviously, these things right here, we can do so much within a given day. And it's for that reason we're busier than ever. We have more anxiety than ever. It's exciting because we can accomplish a lot. We can start companies behind a computer with distributed teams all over the world. And I think we really saw this lifestyle and need for more transitional products start with the industry of athleisure. Things like Lululemon that made obviously fitness clothing far more fashionable. And what that did is actually reduced our overall need for clothing in general. It was the biggest industry from a fashion standpoint during the pandemic specifically. And so how we're re-envisioning that for the future is through this industry that we're calling work leisure. Obviously, we all live very different lives now than we did 2 years ago prior to the pandemic. The future of life is hybridized work, And so what that means in the industry of footwear, and luckily we're serendipitous in that we started creating this product before the pandemic, and it actually came to market in a time that I think it has a better fit than it ever could have, is you need to design things with the comfort and ease of work from home, but with the look and fashionable aesthetic to help you go out in the world and feel like your best self. And through creating things like that, it creates more transitional use case product, as well as more durable product. It's easy to clean, it's fully water repellent, et cetera. And it's through doing that we'll actually consume less. I think the company that's done this the best over the years is Patagonia. People call them Patagucci for a reason. And the reason that is because you can dress something up like a Patagonia fleece and wear it out on Wall Street to client meetings, but you can also wear it in the backpacks of the Adirondacks over a weekend. And so it's this coupling of high price pointed items that can have luxury appeal, but are also extremely deeply useful versus what's existed in the world to date is, luxury brands and functional sustainable brands are almost treated as like these mutually exclusive environments. And that's unacceptable. We can do better than that. We're moving society forward in so many other ways where we can bring a higher definition and vision to an age-old industry that's been around for thousands of years.
What about your supply chain? How do you manage the production and supply chain of your footwear?
Yeah, so we do produce in Dongguan, China, obviously with geopolitical tensions. That, as everything is in the world we live in, is a very black and white conversation. What people don't realize is footwear is a really difficult industry to operate within, in that it's very capital intensive, first and foremost, and two, as a brand that's trying to be very forward thinking and transparent with using new materials in the sustainability space, for example, sugarcane infusions, recycled leather, etc. These are not easy to work with materials. Sustainability is very expensive. And so finding partners in the US and factories early on to work with these materials, one, was just generally hard to find in general because a lot of factories in the US are poorly equipped to work with these materials. And two, it's just out of range cost-wise for a brand like ourselves that was bootstrapped, and we funded ourselves off our 401k and liquidated Google shares during the pandemic. To put things in perspective, a sample when I started this company here in the US, even trying to use some of the materials I was using would have cost $1,600 just to see the concept. It cost $48 overseas in China. And this is also after doing fair labor factory audits. So we're working with factories that are extremely compliant in terms of, really high fair labor practices. And also China just in general, in a lot of ways, is a lot more well equipped to work with a lot of these sustainable new age materials that create quality, consistent product over time. Dongguan, China is the footwear capital of the world. And so, of course, there are geopolitical tensions that bleed, across the UK, the US, China, etc. But nothing is black and white. It's a lot deeper than that. It really comes down to the relationships that you have. Fortunately, the partners we have overseas are absolutely top notch. They're launching one of the biggest brands out there, footwear brands, going into next year, and they're who has enabled us to work with the factories that we work with. A brand like ourselves, essentially founded out of a garage, would never be sharing a factory with Cole Haan and Burberry. It's the agents that we've had over there that have enabled us to do that. And we're super fortunate for it. Of course, the port of Long Beach is bottlenecked, so that's that's kind of the great equalizer. You can only get around that in so many ways. Luckily, we've seen that we have a very loyal following. Even less than a year in, we have about a 20% repeat customer rate. So even running pre-order on product that we're sold out of, when we actually communicate, quite honestly, we found customers are quite willing and able. Like our sales actually go up. You kind of have this fear of missing out effect. But supply chain will continue to evolve. I think everyone's hopeful that the world will continue to come back in the way that we all want it to. But it comes down to being adaptive and agile to be able to change over time. And I think we believe just relationships are everything, and we're fortunate for the relationships that we have that represent us overseas from a supply chain perspective as well as here. And that's what's gotten us to where we are.
You are something revolutionary, so there's nothing to do with the conventional way to create shoes, footwear, clothes, whatever it is. How much weight R&D in your company? Because you need to find new materials and adapt new materials to new styles. That's a lot of job.
You say how much weight, or how many people work for us?
Yeah, how much work has to be done in developing, researching, all this kind of stuff? A
lot. First and foremost, we're a brand that tries to hold we hold ourselves to radical transparency, but we also hold ourselves to being as forward thinking and working with the best available products that are commercially available as possible. We're essentially a three or four person full-time operation that did $750,000 in sales during a pandemic. We have been featured in tons of publications. I'm not trying to be cocky. It's just I think we've proven that we've been able to do a lot with very little to date. But nothing's changing there. There are some really exciting material innovations coming out, some of which we'll be looking to integrate moving into next year in 2023. We're also actively developing new silhouettes. Also, we're in an industry, full transparency, that it's one of the more difficult industries to cash flow versus a tech business, which is very not capital intensive. And so getting out well in front of inventory management crises, especially with the unpredictability of supply chain. The burden of myself and my co-founder just to well in advance be able to solve cash flow as early founders to it. It's not easy, but at the same time, life's not worth living if you're doing something that's easy. And so while it's difficult, I truly believe the number one operational priority of a founder is actually emotional management. Because if you can, have a practice where you're distilling out all the kind of crap and narratives in your head, it helps you more clearly see sort of what's out in front of you and helps you be a more solutions-focused, pragmatic founder. And I think as long as we stay on the ball there, continue to be humble, continue to lean on the support system that, you know, we've been so fortunate to develop to date. And at the end of the day, brands are people, companies are people. The number one IP of any company are the people that are behind it. And so we need to continue to treat the people that work for us and that have sacrificed so much for us with a culture that, you know, we push on our consumers. And if we stay true to that cause, I have no doubt that, you know, whenever we get punched, we'll not be able to get back up.
I mean, I saw one thing very unusual. You have one price for men and women, which is almost impossible to see. You know, normally they price more women because women, they like to spend more on everything when it comes to be, you know, on the body, from shoes to clothes, whatever it is. And I can see you are anyway targeting millennials from the 25 to the 40, 45, very oriented to, you know, climate change, all these very social topics, even Black Lives Matter, or whatever it is, trying to bring equality as well, which is absolutely something great, and we need all of us to follow and actually to bring forward. How do you manage your pricing? How do you market your footwear?
Yeah, so I mean, different pricing for men and women. Obviously, we've lived in a society that for far too long has placed different burdens, standards, et cetera, on different genders. I mean, if you want to know something, I mean, it runs as deep as within the tariff code itself. When importing from overseas into the US, tariffs on female goods are higher than tariffs on male goods. That is so deeply messed up, and we are so deeply ingrained in this culture that it's going to take a lot of time, and it's a really complicated topic to back ourselves out of. At that said, there's no excuse for not making as much progress as we can as possible. And so obviously, I mean, we're at the same time, I am a firm believer that like we are different. I mean, like genders have inherent differences. Everyone has a story. I think that's really where it starts. Everyone's story is different, and that goes beyond gender. We're all just humans, and you know, our journey to where we are today is of unique importance. And so from a pricing perspective and a product design perspective, I mean, who would we be to ever approach pricing different? I mean, yes, we do try to sort of appeal in this sort of minimalistic, simplistic, but deeply thought through design philosophy, where we try to have more androgynous product design. And from a pricing standpoint, yeah, I mean, of course, if it's the same product they're providing to both worlds, who would we be to raise that? But in terms of our pricing philosophy overall, we really define ourselves as sort of sitting within the overall category of affordable luxury. And I know that can maybe even sound like an oxymoron, but like we said, sustainability isn't cheap. I can tell you firsthand that, you know, having been through this design process, manufacturing process, you hit hiccups, it's expensive. Working with these materials is not easy. You're oftentimes very annoying for manufacturers as both a low volume net new company and trying to do really hard things. And so with that sort of definition of affordable luxury in mind, pricing is very sensitive and important for us to think through, because we're really trying to push a culture where we're people that like to buy things at the end of the day. We're consumers. We like to look good. We're primates at the end of the day. So let's give ourselves a break. But when producing things of value and purchasing things of value, it needs to sort of be at a price point that maybe sort of for your average consumer that spends $80 to $90 on shoes, maybe it's a little bit out of their comfort zone and what they would normally spend for a conventional brand, but it's so deeply packed with usefulness that that price point is worth it. And then for the luxury shopper, you know, that has no hesitation in spending $300 to $400 on these brands that are not sustainable for the most part, or attainable for the majority of society, our product seems very cheap, like not cheap, but like, oh my God, that's like, yeah, let's get it going, because they're the trendsetters in the world. And that's obviously from just a business standpoint, what needs to happen to make Ponto a movement and just galvanize popularity around this. So it's a sensitive dance, especially with inflation, and something we'll continue to consider in potentially, you know, raising prices slightly in the future, especially as material costs have gone up a lot overseas. But at presently, I think we've really priced ourselves right. There's a funny sort of phonetic dance with like being priced in the 120s versus the 130s and the psychology of the brain. So
Wait, there is a very slightly difference between affordable luxury and cheap price. How do you manage it? Because when you message it, you need to be very precise. You need to be very good.
yeah, I mean, I really think it starts with pushing a lifestyle. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, like, I know we think in a world of like the what first, but it really goes down. I'm a big believer in like Simon Sinek's golden circle. Like it starts with the why, then it's the how, then it's the what. And so dancing of the line of something being cheap versus expensive, you're 100% correct, is a sensitive dance. But I think it really starts with communicating to consumers and educating consumers in thought-provoking ways, rather. Where, for example, like the reason we own so much stuff in our lives is because we've bought into this philosophy that we need to buy more things to solve who we are and to be happy people. That's the nature of living in a capitalistic society. Like the mental health crisis is worse than it's ever been. We live in a world where we watch advertisements and are convinced that through buying more crap, that's what's going to help guide us towards who we actually are. But I think as a brand and just someone personally, our entire founding team really values mindfulness and mental health. It actually helps clarify for yourself like what you actually want out of this world. Is it starting a company? Is it traveling? Is it quitting that job that you hate? Is it having that difficult conversation with that person? And through doing that, I think it actually unveils like, oh, I can do a lot more in this world and be a lot happier of a person with a lot less. And when you change that narrative in someone's life, their willingness to, in our case, like our shoe, it's like a three, it takes what otherwise would maybe be 3 to 4 pairs of shoes and turns it into one. At that point, it's really easy, but it's the wake up moment of, well, why do I own 4 pairs of shoes, 15 pairs of shoes, whatever it is for that person? And so I know that didn't directly answer your question, but I really do think it's a psychographic issue that if you tackle head on, I mean, where the millennials love talking about mental health and emotional awareness. I think if you tackle it in that way and then tie back sort of why these product realities and consumption realities exist within our life, it runs a lot deeper and comes off as very genuine.
I mean, what about your business model? You are B2C, you already said you want to move later on in B2B. And what is behind the 20% give back?
20% return customer rate. What's behind that? Yeah, I mean, I think, and once again, this isn't cocky. We're perfectly imperfect, as I'd say. We have so much more that we can do and so much more to work on. We're first-time founders. We're coachable. Like, we know that we're not doing everything right. But I do think from a product perspective, we came out with something that appeals really effectively to what people expect and want out of the world. At the end of the day, using myself as an extrapolation of what the world looks like in the future, we literally started talking about this call about how, this new life of being able to work from multiple locations. Like right now I'm traveling for work in New York. I'm going to be in Tahoe at the end of the month. And so at the end of the day, I almost want to live with less. I want to be able to live out of a suitcase. I want to live with something that's water repellent. I want to live with something that's comfortable, that's light, but also makes me look good. If I'm going to go on a date, that I can wear it. And so it's just generally appealing to this, being able to do the most with as little as possible. While also preaching, brand narratives around what matters to people right now, which is progressive causes, it's mental health issues, the founder story, not greenwashing. It's like when things are hard, we talk about how sustainability is hard. We don't package that up. And so I think it's a lot of things. We've created a brand that I'm really proud, in a really difficult year that I think is appealing to people. We can continue to do a much better job of that. I do firmly believe that, but from a product perspective and all things considered, I think it's just, we're doing a lot of the right things and we just need to continue to do them. But once again, that doesn't come from a place of us thinking we're infallible or that, we're perfect by any measure. We're 1 year into this. There's so much we can be doing better. But
yeah, there is never end to learn and to improve. I mean, what about the design? I mean, we've been talking about design, but you have one type, if I'm right. What are you going to do next? You really somehow, I know it's not absolutely the same, and probably this analogy is wrong, but in somehow it reminds me Tesla, okay? One type of car and a lot of technology behind. And what makes the difference is not the car, but actually is technology behind, right? So we think about Tesla is tech, it's not car. Thinking about you yourself, for me, it's so much impact and R&D and one product in front of it. They're showing all the research and all the great job we are doing. What is going to be next? Are you going to create more designs, shoes? What's going to be?
Yeah. So, I mean, simply put, I think with our present silhouette, while it has done well, we do skew about 55% male, 45% female. It does have a bit of masculine tinge to it. And I'll wholeheartedly say like that, coming up with a wholly androgynous silhouette is a really hard thing to do. At the same time, with the future products that we'll come out with, which we're already in design of, they'll all continue to sit under this product thesis of hybridization, of how do we take multiple occasional use case pieces of footwear and combine them into one. And so we're currently in the works of a loafer slipper hybrid, as well as a boot hybrid. I know some of those people are like, what? Like loafers and slippers together? And it's like, exactly. Like if we can tackle that, less with more, or more with less rather. So yeah, that's 100% where we'll continue to go. I think we'll also, in the longer term, just in creating the broader merchandising orbit of Ponto, everything will continue to go in this direction of making more useful items and reducing what's in one's closet. But it doesn't start from a place of putting things in people's Instagram feed of big trash piles. Or I just think marketing something sustainability first is a really hard thing to do. I don't mean this to sound nihilistic in any way, but at the end of the day, like I said, we are primates as a people, and we care about looking good, feeling good, and being comfortable first. But at the same time, we also love story, and we love to be able to talk about things as if we're a part of something deeper. And so if we're a brand that can create products first and foremost that are useful, sustainable, fashionable, comfortable, light, etc., and then layer on top of that and educate our consumers about how much thought we put into the materials, the design, etc., to the point where they feel that it's an extension and representation of how they vote, who they believe themselves to be, what their value set is. That's what will matter most. And so we'll probably expand into broader consumer apparel longer term. We'll stay in the space of footwear in the shorter term. And yeah, we're already in the process of designing under this thesis of sort of hybridized silhouettes, what our future styles will be.
What's the vision for your company?
I mean, I don't think there is, and I mean, potentially maybe contradicts what I just said, but I don't think there's one company out there that is like the sustainability company. I know there are companies that have tried to become that. And if you were to ask me who that is today, I would think it's Patagonia does it the truest. You know, Amazon is the e-commerce company. Nike is the company for athletes. Apple is the company for challenging the status quo and doers. Ponto, I want to become the sustainability company. We are the brand that, and we're not here yet, but the vision is to become, we're the brand that creates the standard of doing hard things and actually tackling sustainabilities in ways that, you know, obviously both produce outcomes for our shareholders, because that's important, but at the same time, treat people right, our understanding of what's going on within the millennial psychographic and just the psychographic of society as a whole. And so, yeah, I mean, it's to create a global brand that really is the standard of sustainability, both from how we brand ourselves and encourage our consumers to live, both in how we think about our products, and sustainability isn't just about the climate. Sustainable comes down to how can we live more happily and peacefully on this planet? That's sustainable versus being overly busy, overly worked, etc. And so that definition, I know sustainability is kind of a dead-end term, but yeah, it's that. I mean, we wanted to grow this to be a global brand. I mean, by 2030, we want to be doing over $200 million in revenue. At the same time, we don't want to be sort of, and I'm not going to name any names, immensely overcapitalized. I think you've seen with how much cash is out there in the market, and coming out of 2015, the sort of like 2015 to 2018 D2C boom. I mean, you've seen these companies that just immensely overcapitalize themselves with outside capital. And with that, take on customer acquisition costs that are just asinine. And a lot of that, there's a lot of danger in that. I mean, I'm a firm believer of that. What goes up quickly comes down quickly. And so you run the risk of chasing trends. And as opposed to if you're a brand like a Patagonia that went up healthily, we'll say, you never come down. And so I think that's a delicate dance, both of, you know, keeping shareholder outcome in mind, keeping aggressive growth and ensuring that, you know, first mover advantage, things like that are of the utmost importance. But I would say that is really sort of, outside of hiring and bringing people in that appeal to our culture and what we're trying to create, is probably the biggest risk or no-go of us achieving the vision we have for this brand.
So if you can give a message to investors, what will be your message? Why they should invest in yourself? Because startup is visited by founders and in Ponto.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we want to bring investors in who are a culture fit to what we're trying to create. Obviously, to be a brand that's viable, you need to be commercially viable. We're not blind to that. But at the same time, relationships are everything to us. And so if there's investors out there who don't develop deep relationships with their founders, that's not an investor we're interested in doing. At the same time, if you're an investor who's very relationships first, we're an extension of sort of who you wish to be, the vision you have for the world or for your kids. That's 100% where we want to be. At the same time, it's just funny. I mean, I think you've seen this sort of whiplash in the world of consumer, where I think back in 2016 to 2018, like direct to consumer everyone was hot and bothered about it. It was the future, retail was going to dead. You saw so much money thrown at so many of these companies, way too much, arguably. And then what, has recently come out with some of these docuseries or IPOs and S1s is that these companies were taking on immense acquisition costs that, now it's like this other like whiplash effect where it's like, oh, D2C isn't what it used to be. Invest in, only deep tech and things of that sort. And I want my message to investors to be just don't think so black and white. At the end of the day, a brand is the people that are behind it, and invest in founders that you believe in. And I'm not saying that I'm the right person for that, but it's just to be a little less myopic and whiplashy in that way, where it's, there are a lot of feet out there. And so I think, the market opportunity is big. You'll find different investors who, some like big markets, some like really niche things. But I think what you're seeing right now out there in general is a lot of investors are just chasing deep tech and really sexy new tech ideas. But with a lot of that deep tech, like, how often are they revenue generating? I think that's something that's frustrating for us, is like with this whiplash of like, oh, investing in consumer is complicated, we don't want to be involved. It's like don't view things so black and white. Everything is in the gray. Get to know people, take the time. And so, yeah, I mean, that was a sort of broad strokes answers, and I have a lot of different thoughts about that. I think raising as a consumer brand in general is hard because of this sort of shiny object syndrome that exists amongst investors in general, of chasing the latest and greatest and all this stuff. But just things to keep in mind when deciding who to start a conversation with and who to write a check for.
Aaron, thank you so much for coming to BizTalk. It's been a very great pleasure for me having you. Thank you so much.
Thanks a ton for having me.